Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me on the first ever Slice of Real Estate podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Today's episode, I am joined by Emily Chan, the co founder and CEO at Lilo. Emily, how are you today?
Very good, Jared. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. I think we should dive right into it. We usually keep these. This is my first Slice of Real Estate podcast, but I've done a lot of these on in healthcare and other verticals. So I'd love to hear more about you.
No, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Australia for the first 18 years of my life. So I grew up in Melbourne, and then I moved out to the UK for university. So studied a bachelor's of law at Cambridge, and then went on to do a master's in law and finance at Oxford. So after that, I spent some time working on strategic planning for the Secretary General of the United Nations in New York, and then moved to London to begin my career in finance. So I invested in European real estate, both on the equity and lending side. So first from Goldman Sachs's balance sheet, and then I moved out to another large private equity fund called Apollo, doing broadly the same thing from the flagship European fund. So that was about $5 billion in size.
Really interesting. And it was after your time there that you came up with the idea for Lilo, right? So
Yeah,
let's dive in
exactly.
a little bit to three things: the why, how, and what of Lilo.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think through my time at Goldman and Apollo, I was seeing a lot of the more traditional lens of the asset-backed industry. So over the years, I was always highly cognizant of the lag that I perceived between the real estate space as it is today and the everyday behaviors of the more modern generation. And that drove me to start brainstorming ways in which we could use the technology space to drive change and narrow down this gap. So I met my co-founder Chris at the start of this year. So he's a software engineer by trade. He completed his master's thesis in computer science at Stanford. And he also co-founded a consumer lifestyle company back in the day. And us meeting up and bouncing ideas with each other, that was really the impetus behind us co-founding this company, Lilo, together, which what we're trying to do is marry and drive the synergies between the property industry and the technology and consumer lifestyle space. So essentially, in terms of Lilo's why, we saw a fundamental disjunct between the way real estate and home ownership operates today, and the natural behaviors and lifestyles of the modern wave of working professionals and ambitious creatives. So for property ownership and investment, as the landscape stands today, we essentially see two main solutions. You can either purchase a property outright, or you can put your money into, for example, a real estate investment trust, which will earn you a modest passive yield over time. And then if you look at these two options, the problem with the first, which is buying a property outright, there are two main problems with that. So, first, you're burdened by the hassle and ambiguity behind foreign property investment because we're talking about properties that are not your primary residence, and the obligation to take care of maintenance, cleaning, property taxes going forward. And I think the second point on a lifestyle level is that you're tied to just one property and one subset of experiences for the next 20, 30 years of your life. Now, when you look at the second option, which is investing your money in a real estate investment trust, the problem with that is you don't get the utilization and the lifestyle enrichment benefits if you're just making a passive arm's length investment. So that's why we're seeing consumers turn increasingly to solutions like Airbnb, like hotels, because they prioritize the hassle free component and the flexibility behind their travel experiences. And so, after doing some diligence on this space, that's essentially the conclusion that we came to. So, consumers these days, they want to use mobility and travel to complement and enrich their existing ways of living. And they want solutions to be fluid and easy and diverse all at the same time. So the solution that we found at Lilo was essentially to establish a new asset class and set up what we call an invest and experience platform. So the product that we've created, it combines the investment and asset appreciation potential of property ownership, but it marries that with the ability to use and experience properties within the Lilo collection on a day-to-day basis. So, given our target audience of ambitious visionaries, creatives, working professionals, what we're doing is we're building up a portfolio of luxury properties amongst the city centers of what our user groups perceive to be the most exciting hubs in the world. So that's sort of places like London, like Barcelona, like Berlin, like Amsterdam.
Now, the initial focus, Emily, of the countries that you just listed is this largely due also to just your background and familiarity with those markets?
Yeah, I think look, we're basing the company out of London, right? So that's where we're headquartered, and our team has a very pan-European spread. So I think a familiarity with this European jurisdiction is why we're going to launch our initial cities out in this continent, and then later on, I think the company definitely has a global ambition. So we'll be looking to expand out into the US, to Asia, to Africa.
And you just I know you had an oversubscribed wait list. But
Yes, that's right.
I signed up for your wait list because we're going to give a shout out to Tim Fitzpatrick in New York
Hey.
because Tim supports so many entrepreneurs. He is always commenting on what they're doing, and that's how I found out about you and Lilo. So
Amazing.
uh, Emily, so when we talk about I know you mentioned a little bit, but how the product works, right? Um, can you talk us through at a very high level, right? So
Yeah.
I sign up on the let's go from the investor end. I sign
Yep,
up as
sure.
an investor. What can I expect?
Yeah, sure. So, how does the product work? Essentially, what we're doing is we're taking a property, a luxury property, and we're fractionalizing ownership in that asset using an SPV or an LLC structure. So, the standard model that we offer is 8 fractions per property. And there are two components to your share, right? So, there's the investment ownership component. And that's where the value of your share will appreciate alongside fluctuations in the market value of your property. And then there's the utilization component, which is where I think it gets quite interesting. So each investor will get exclusive use over their property for 45 days in the year. And you can start leveraging technology to play around with the utilization component by mixing up these 45 days to start offering a range of cities, a range of different experiences on an ongoing rotating basis around the Lilo property collection. And you can do that while maintaining the investment exposure and the price appreciation potential centered around one particular ownership of a property and market. I think the nice thing about the product also is that it's hassle free. So we take care of all the maintenance, the cleaning, the scheduling, and so forth. And when we were doing user interviews for potential customers, this was one of the major pain points that we identified behind purchasing a second home. It was that alongside the ambiguity in foreign property investment, which is also something that the company will naturally take care of as well.
Yeah, talking to a lot of people over here in the States, I think a lot of us would love to invest in foreign properties, but not understanding the market, like you can tell what a nice property looks like and if this would be something that you would want to use, right? But like the legality behind it and everything, that's a different story. So the fact that you're helping with that is huge.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So you mentioned this a little bit when you were talking about how the product works, but I guess at a high level, um, if you were just pitching to investors, what are some of the give us a handful of benefits that investors can expect by going through the Lilo platform?
Yeah, sure. So these investors into the Lilo collection, essentially, they on a rational level, they get the investment benefits of property ownership and price appreciation potential, and that's coupled with access to a sought after, curated portfolio of assets around the world. But I think interestingly, taking a step back, on a more emotional level, in our increasingly remote world, I think a global and decentralized sense of community and the idea of belonging that accompanies it, it's becoming so important these days. And by virtue of participating in shared ownership and by virtue of being able to utilize an international and diversified portfolio, I think people utilizing the Lilo properties, they naturally benefit from an expanding sense of global citizenship as they're growing their roots and their international presence worldwide through this product.
And in terms of, let's talk a little bit about what you're excited about, what's next for the company.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we had our launch 2 weeks ago, our official launch, and that was super exciting. It was a really great experience. So it brought in over 1,000 signups to our waitlist from our website, and these were interested customers for the product looking to potentially invest in our properties. And so, look, we see Lilo, I think, first and foremost, as an experience for people to invest into the property collection. So, our aspiration is to reinvent the traditional real estate space and to establish a new asset class in order to combine the modern generation's desire to invest while complementing and enriching their lifestyles with diversity in travel experience, in mobility, and luxury. And I think if you take a step back, that attracts a very specific type of person and profile that more often than not tends to be driven by an innate curiosity to explore what the world has to offer. And the natural consequence of that is a community of creatives and visionaries being born out of the Lilo collection. So keeping that in mind, for us, it's very important to meet and to get to know these people on the wait list and to understand what really drives them on a day-to-day basis, how they're going to use the Lilo product, and importantly, what they'll bring from their subset of life and professional experiences into the Lilo community. So that is the process that we're currently going through over the coming weeks. So we're speaking to people on the wait list to identify the initial group that will receive access to our first property drops over the coming months this year.
I'm so excited for you and the team, and I can't wait to see the properties on the platform and everything that you continue to do in this space because I know you're gonna crush it. And in your enthusiasm and everything is it's so refreshing to see. Congratulations so far on everything.
Thank you so much, Jared. Really appreciate it.
Well, Emily, hopefully we can have you come on again, give us an update on where you're at, and maybe talk with some other people in the real estate space, kind of to give us your take on certain parts of it. I know a lot of people would love
Absolutely.
to hear your thoughts on just real estate overseas. But yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Jared.